They told everyone I wanted a divorce. They said I was tearing the family apart, cold and selfish, walking away without warning. What they didn't know was that I'd been reading my husband's divorce plans for 6 months. I found out the same way you learn most ugly truths now. Not through confession, not through honesty, through a notification he forgot to silence. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch that night, the television humming with a show neither of us was watching. He was laughing at something on his phone, one of those relaxed, unguarded laughs that only happens when someone feels safe. When his screen lit up again, he didn't notice. He leaned forward to grab his glass of water. The phone buzzed once, then again. I wasn't trying to look. I really wasn't. But when you've spent 12 years learning someone's rhythms, you notice patterns without effort. He never got texts that late unless it was work, or his brother, or next steps for filing, revised timeline attached. The preview sat there, bold and undeniable. My name wasn't in it, but his was. The sender, Martin Hale, family law attorney. I didn't move. I didn't breathe differently. I didn't let my face change. I let the moment pass exactly the way moments like that always do, quietly, slipping into your body where no one else can see it. He picked up his phone a second later, glanced at the screen, and locked it. "Everything okay?" he asked, casual, warm, practiced. "Yeah," I said, "just tired." That was the first lie I let live between us. People think divorces begin with screaming. They imagine slam doors, late-night fights, accusations flung like knives. Ours didn't. Ours began with calendar invites, with polite conversations about next quarter, with careful language, with someone deciding, quietly, that he would leave and that I would take the blame. My husband's name was Caleb Rowe. He was charming in the way that felt effortless. Tall, unthreatening, the kind of man who remembered birthdays and always offered to help carry groceries. People trusted him immediately. They always had. I was Lena Whitaker, the steady one, the organizer, the person who remembered everything so no one else had to. We didn't have children. That detail mattered later. From the outside, our marriage looked fine. Not dramatic, not tragic, just stable enough that no one would expect what came next, and that was exactly what Caleb was counting on. The first time I realized he was building a story without me, it came from his sister. Her name was Naomi. She called me one afternoon, voice tight with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. I was in the kitchen chopping onions for dinner. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" There was a pause, not silence, hesitation. "Caleb said you've been distant," she said carefully, "like you're not sure you want to be married anymore." The knife slipped, just slightly. "I didn't say that," I replied. "I didn't think so," Naomi said quickly. "It just caught me off guard." I laughed it off. I always did, smoothed it over, redirected. But that night, after Caleb fell asleep, I opened my laptop and did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I checked our shared cloud account. He'd never changed the password. There were folders, neatly labeled, date-stamped, post-separation budget mediation talking points narrative, family. I stared at that last one for a long time before opening it. Inside was a document, bullet points, clean, strategic. Emphasize emotional distance from Lena. Frame divorce as reluctant but necessary. Highlight attempts to make it work. Position self as stability-preserving party. I didn't cry. That surprised me later. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was recognition. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was a campaign. The timestamp on the first email to his lawyer was dated 6 months ago. I scrolled. There it was, the beginning. "Caleb, I want to proceed carefully. I don't want to be seen as the one breaking up the family. Lena has always been more independent. I think people will understand if this looks like her decision." I leaned back in my chair and let the room go quiet. 6 months. 6 months of shared dinners. 6 months of holidays planned together. 6 months of him asking me about my day. 6 months of preparation. Once you know someone is lying, you start to see how often they do it. Caleb became softer, more patient, more helpful. He offered to do dishes. He asked if I needed anything. He complimented me in front of others. It was subtle, strategic. He was padding the narrative. At family gatherings, he'd sigh quietly when I excused myself early. "Lena's been overwhelmed lately," he'd say. "I'm trying to give her space." When I worked late, he'd mention it gently. "She's been really focused on her own things. I don't want to pressure her." He never accused, he suggested, and people filled in the rest. It happened at his parents' anniversary dinner. 25 people, toasts, wine glasses clinking. His mother, Elaine, smiled at us across the table. "You two are so quiet lately," she said. "Everything okay?" Before I could answer, Caleb reached for my hand. "We're working through some things," he said warmly. "Lena needs time." Every eye turned to me. I felt it then, the shift, the subtle tilt of judgment. I smiled. "Work's just been busy," I said, but the damage was already done. The calls started after that. Friends checking in, aunties offering advice, well-meaning concern wrapped around assumptions I hadn't agreed to. "You don't have to rush into anything," someone said. "Just make sure you're not acting out of fear," another advised. Fear, as if I was the uncertain one. Meanwhile, Caleb's emails kept coming. "Caleb, I think mediation with family present could help. It might show I'm not trying to isolate her." Family present, so they could watch. The turning point didn't come from anger. It came from calm. One night, as he slept beside me, breathing evenly, I scrolled through his messages again. One text stood out, sent to his lawyer just 3 weeks earlier. "Caleb, she doesn't know yet, but when I initiate the conversation, I think she'll react emotionally. That contrast should help." I locked my phone. That was it. Not betrayal, not heartbreak, erasure. He wasn't just leaving me, he was replacing me in the story. I didn't confront him, I didn't ask questions, I didn't warn anyone. I went quiet. When he suggested space, I agreed. When he mentioned counseling, I nodded. When he proposed a family mediation session, his idea, I said yes. He thought that meant I was cornered. What it really meant was that I'd chosen the stage. I didn't screenshot everything, I exported it. Emails, attachments, metadata. I built a timeline. Not emotional, not accusatory, just dates. I practiced saying nothing. And the more silent I became, the more confident Caleb grew. He mistook calm for surrender. That's a common error. The mediation was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. Neutral location, a private conference room at a community center. Caleb personally invited everyone, his parents, his siblings, 2 close family friends. "I want transparency," he said. "I don't want this to feel like secrets." I watched him deliver that line in the mirror one morning. He believed it. The night before the mediation, Caleb packed a folder. I packed a timeline. He thought he was walking into validation. I was walking into the truth. There's a particular kind of calm that only comes after you stop trying to be understood. It isn't peace, it isn't acceptance, it's clarity. Once I stopped correcting the story Caleb was telling, everything became simpler. When his Aunt Marjorie pulled me aside after brunch and said, "You know, marriage takes compromise," I nodded. When his father sighed and said, "I just hope you're not making a decision you'll regret," I thanked him for caring. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I let them believe what they were already choosing to believe, because belief, once fully formed, has weight, and weight makes impact louder when it falls. The quieter I became, the more relaxed Caleb grew. He started sleeping better. He hummed while making coffee. He whistled once while tying his shoes, something he hadn't done in years. One night he said, "I really appreciate how mature you're being about this." I looked up from my book. "About what?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction. "You know," he said, "everything." I smiled. Of course. That smile did more to reassure him than any argument ever could have. 3 days before the mediation, I overheard him on the phone in the garage. The door wasn't fully closed. "I'm not attacking her," he was saying. "I just want everyone to understand how hard I tried." A pause. Yes, I'll bring up counseling and the space I gave her. Another pause. I think once they hear it all laid out, it'll be clear. Clear. I wondered briefly if he would recognize the word later. The conference room was beige and forgettable by design. Long rectangular table, neutral artwork, water pitchers sweating onto coasters. A woman named Denise Calder, the mediator, greeted us politely. She was professional, calm, and clearly used to emotional volatility. She looked at me with gentle concern. Caleb noticed. He always noticed when people took his side without realizing they had. Family members filtered in slowly. Elaine sat close to Caleb, Naomi across from me, his father, Richard, at the head beside Denise. No one sat next to me. I didn't mind. Empty space can be useful. Denise explained the process. Respect. Listening. No interruptions. Caleb volunteered to speak first. Of course he did. He folded his hands, took a breath. I never thought we'd be here, he began. I really believed we could work through anything. Elaine dabbed at her eyes. I've always seen marriage as a partnership, Caleb continued. And lately, I felt like I was the only one still trying. He glanced at me. Just once. Measured. Controlled. I don't want a divorce, he said softly, but I can't force someone to stay. Silence filled the room. Not awkward, reverent. Denise nodded sympathetically. Thank you for sharing that, she said. Then she turned to me. Lena? Every face followed. I didn't speak right away, not because I was overwhelmed, because I was allowing the moment to finish forming. I appreciate everyone being here, I said calmly. I know this isn't comfortable. Caleb relaxed visibly. I don't have much to add right now, I continued. I think it's important to hear everything first. That was when Naomi frowned. It was subtle, but it was there. Caleb didn't notice. Once permission was given, the opinions came quickly. Richard leaned forward. We just want honesty. Marjorie said, No one's blaming you, dear, but communication matters. Elaine's voice trembled. I just don't understand why you didn't say something sooner. Sooner, as if I'd been the one planning in silence. Denise raised a hand gently. Let's slow down. Caleb placed a comforting hand on his mother's arm. It's okay, he said. This is hard for everyone. That was the moment I realized something important. He wasn't just lying. He was enjoying this. Denise looked at me again. Lena, do you feel comfortable sharing your perspective now? I nodded. Yes, I said. But first, I want to make sure we're all talking about the same timeline. Caleb tilted his head, curious. Timeline? He asked lightly. I reached into my bag and placed a single folder on the table. It wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. This isn't emotional, I said. It's factual. Caleb's smile stayed in place. For now. I think there's been some confusion about when certain decisions were made, I continued, so I put together a record. Denise nodded. That's fine, as long as it's relevant. It is, I said. I opened the folder. The first page was simple. A date. 6 months earlier. Caleb leaned forward. That's not necessary, he said, still calm. We're here to talk about how we feel. I met his eyes. I am, I replied, and slid the page toward the center of the table. The room had not yet understood what was about to happen, but it was already too late to stop it. The paper lay in the center of the table like a quiet accusation. No raised voices, no dramatics, just ink and dates. Denise adjusted her glasses. What am I looking at, Lena? A starting point, I said. June 14th, last year. Caleb's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's not when anything started, he said quickly. We were fine then. I nodded. We were. And then I turned the page. The second page was a printed email. No edits, no highlighting, just his words. Denise leaned forward to read. I want to initiate a divorce in a way that minimizes my exposure and keeps family perception on my side. The room inhaled as one. Elaine's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Caleb laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. That's taken out of context. I didn't respond. I flipped the page.
This one was a text message exchange, Caleb and a contact saved as M. Hargreave ESQ. If I frame it as her pulling away emotionally, will that help? Yes, the reply read. Consistency matters. Start laying groundwork early. Naomi whispered, "Oh my God." Caleb's face lost color. "This is private correspondence," Caleb snapped. "You had no right—" "I did," I said evenly. "They were sent from a shared device, same laptop you used for our taxes." Denise cleared her throat. "Please continue, Lena." Caleb turned to her. "This is turning into an ambush." Denise didn't look at him. She was still reading. The next page was worse, a bullet point list, dated 6 months before he told anyone I wanted a divorce. Emphasize trying everything. Mention counseling, even if brief. Avoid specifics. Keep it emotional. Present as patient, supportive, blindsided. Richard's voice was hoarse. "Caleb, what is this?" Caleb swallowed. "Notes, just notes." "Notes about what?" Naomi asked sharply. No answer. Elaine stood up slowly, gripping the back of her chair. "You told me she was distant," she said, "that you didn't know why." Caleb looked at her, panic flashing now. "Mom, listen." "You told me she was breaking the family," Elaine continued, "that you were trying to save it." "I was," he insisted. I spoke then. "You were planning your exit," I said quietly, "and you wanted witnesses." Silence slammed down. Not awkward, heavy. "I need to clarify something," Denise said, voice steady but firm. "Caleb, did you consult a lawyer about divorce 6 months before informing your spouse or family?" Caleb opened his mouth, closed it. "Yes," he said finally, "but that doesn't mean—" "And during that time," Denise continued, "you portrayed yourself to family members as confused, heartbroken, and reactive?" Richard looked like he'd been punched.
"That's deception," Denise said calmly, "not preparation." Caleb's voice rose. "So what? I was protecting myself. Everyone does that." Naomi shot to her feet. "Not by lying to everyone and dragging her name through the mud." Elaine was crying now. Not soft tears, angry ones. "You let me comfort you," she said. "You let me blame her." Caleb's shoulders sagged. The confidence was gone. I took out the last page. "This one," I said, "is from 2 weeks before you told your family I'd suddenly wanted a divorce." Denise read aloud. "Once I tell them, I'll push for mediation quickly. That way she'll look defensive if she brings anything up." Denise looked up slowly. "That's remarkably calculated." Caleb's voice cracked. "I didn't think she'd find that." I met his eyes. "You underestimated me," I said. Richard stood abruptly. "You asked us to come here to mediate her behavior." He gestured toward me. "All this time, you were orchestrating a performance?" Caleb looked around wildly. No allies, no sympathy, no control. "I just didn't want to look like the bad guy," he said weakly. Naomi laughed once. Not humor, disgust. "You didn't want to look like one," she said, "so you made her into one instead." Denise closed the folder gently. "I think," she said, "we need to take a break." No one moved. "I'm done," I said. Caleb turned to me. "Lena, please." "I didn't expose you to punish you," I continued. "I did it because I refused to carry your lie." Elaine didn't look at her son. She looked at me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I nodded once. "I know." I stood, picked up my bag, left the folder where it was, because I didn't need it anymore. The truth was no longer mine alone to hold. As I reached the door, I heard Denise say quietly, "This changes everything." She was right. I didn't look back when I left the building. I didn't need to. The silence behind me was louder than anything that could have been said. By the next morning, the phone started buzzing. Not from Caleb. From everyone else. Naomi called first. "I just wanted you to know," she said, voice tight, "what he did, it's not okay. None of us knew." "I know," I said. "He's been calling people all night," she continued, trying to explain, "but every explanation makes it worse." That didn't surprise me. Lies don't adapt well once exposed. They just splinter. Elaine didn't call. She texted.
I don't know how I talk to you yet, but I need you to know I believe you, and I'm ashamed I didn't see it. I stared at the screen for a long time, then replied with one sentence. Thank you for saying that. Nothing more. Closure doesn't require conversation, just acknowledgement. Caleb emailed me that afternoon. Subject line, please. It was 4 paragraphs of justification, self-pity, and panic. He blamed stress, fear, bad advice. He said he never meant to hurt me. He said he was sorry if I felt betrayed. I archived it. An apology that protects the speaker isn't one. What Caleb didn't anticipate was how quickly truth spreads when it's documented. He'd relied on emotion, I'd brought receipts. Within days, the family group chat split. Some people quietly left, others openly challenged him. Richard stopped taking his calls, Naomi blocked him entirely, and the phrase that kept getting repeated, the one I heard secondhand from 3 different relatives, was always the same. If he could lie that smoothly about his wife, what else has he lied about? Once that question exists, trust never recovers. A week later, my lawyer, Miriam Cross, called. You did exactly the right thing, she said, and not just emotionally. She explained it calmly, clinically. Because Caleb had framed the narrative publicly before filing, and because I had proof of premeditation and manipulation, it affected everything: mediation leverage, asset division, credibility in court. He thought he was building advantage, Miriam said. He was actually building evidence. I smiled for the first time in days. He showed up at my apartment unannounced. I didn't open the door. Lena, he said through the wood, please, just talk to me. I stood on the other side, hand resting flat against the door. This didn't have to happen, he said. I spoke evenly. You're right. Silence. You could have told the truth, I continued, and accepted the consequences like an adult. His voice broke. I didn't think you'd destroy me. I leaned closer to the door. I didn't destroy you, I said. I stepped out of your story. And that was the part he couldn't survive. The divorce finalized quietly. No drama, no spectacle. Because there was nothing left to argue. Caleb lost the moral high ground he'd tried to manufacture, and with it, most of the sympathy he'd depended on. He moved, changed jobs, stopped showing up to family events. Not because anyone banned him, but because silence follows people who expose themselves. I moved too. Smaller place, better light.
I reconnected with friends I distanced myself from while managing his moods. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I stopped explaining myself. One evening, Naomi invited me to dinner. No Caleb, no awkwardness, just real conversation. At the end of the night, she said something that stayed with me. You know, she said, he always wanted to control how he was seen. You just existed, and somehow that won. I nodded. Truth doesn't perform, it waits. The revenge wasn't the exposure. It wasn't watching his story unravel. It wasn't even the quiet satisfaction of being believed. The real victory was this. I no longer needed anyone else to validate what I already knew. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't cold. I wasn't destroying a family. I was refusing to be destroyed for someone else's comfort. Caleb wanted to leave the marriage looking like the victim, so I let him go first, and then I showed everyone who planned it.
You've just stepped into her revenge side, where every wound finds its justice, and every silence ends with truth. If her story struck a chord, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Another secret waits in the next video. See how her revenge begins.